England, 1464. The ground is still stained with blood from 3 years of brutal civil war. Tens of thousands lie dead at Towton, the bloodiest battle ever fought on English soil. And in the Tower of London, a deposed king sits in chains. But a young warrior king named Edward has a problem. His gold coins are disappearing. Flowing across the English Channel to Europe. Melted down. Lost forever. So he did something radical. He creates a new coin. One worth more than ever before. One bearing the symbol of his house, a rose. The Rose Noble. Or as it came to be known, the Ryal. This is an Edward IV Gold Rose Noble, struck between 1464 and 1470 at the height of the Wars of the Roses. And at first glance, it tells you everything about medieval England's relationship with the sea, with God, and with power. On the obverse, we see King Edward IV himself, crowned and armored, standing on a ship. He's holding a sword in one hand and a shield bearing the royal arms in the other, the quartered lions of England and fleurs-de-lis of France, because English kings still claimed to rule France. But look here. On the side of the ship, cutting through the waves, is a large rose. This is the White Rose of York, Edward's emblem in the Wars of the Roses. It's a political statement struck in gold: York rules England. A flag flies from the prow with Edward's initial, E. The ship itself sits on stylized waves, and the whole design is encircled by the legend, Edward Digra Rex Anglz Frank DNSIB, Edward, by the grace of God, King of England and France, Lord of Ireland. The reverse is equally stunning. At its center is a rose on a sunburst, again, York symbol, placed over a cross that terminates in fleurs-de-lis. In the 4 angles between the cross arms sit crowned lions and crowns, all within an ornate picture. And around it runs one of the most famous inscriptions in medieval coinage, IHC Autumn Tranchans PR Medium Elorum Ibit. It's from the Gospel of Luke, but Jesus, passing through their midst, went his way. It's a prayer for divine protection. Just as Christ passed safely through those who would harm him, so may the bearer of this coin, and the king who minted it, be protected from enemies. In 1464, Edward had plenty of those. The coin weighs 120 grains, about 7.8 grams, of 23-karat gold. It measures roughly 38 millimeters in diameter. And it was worth 10 shillings, half a pound sterling. That's roughly $200 to $250 in today's purchasing power. This wasn't pocket change. This was serious money. To understand this coin, you need to understand the man who created it. Edward IV was not supposed to be king. Born April 28, 1442, Edward was the son of Richard, Duke of York, a powerful nobleman with a distant claim to the throne through Edward III. But England already had a king, Henry VI of the House of Lancaster. Henry VI was not a good king. He suffered from a mental breakdown. He was pious to the point of uselessness. He'd lost the 100 Years' War with France. And his French queen, Margaret of Anjou, was making enemies at court left and right. By the 1450s, England was fracturing. York and his allies, wearing white roses, against Lancaster and their supporters, wearing red roses. Private armies. Revenge killings. Open warfare in the streets. The Wars of the Roses have begun. December 30, 1460. Edward's father, Richard of York, was killed at the Battle of Wakefield. His severed head was placed on a spike at York city gates, wearing a paper crown. He'd 49 years old. Edward was just 18. But Edward was not his father. Contemporary accounts describe him as exceptionally tall, 6 feet 4 inches, a giant for the medieval period. Handsome. Charismatic. A natural soldier. And he was out for blood. February 2, 1461. Edward won his first major victory at Mortimer's Cross. Legend says that before the battle, 3 suns appeared in the sky, a rare atmospheric phenomenon called parhelion. Edward told his troops it was the Holy Trinity blessing their cause. His men fought like demons. He marched to London. The city opened its gates. On March 4, 1461, in a hastily arranged ceremony at Westminster Hall, Edward was proclaimed King Edward IV. He was 19 years old. But Henry VI's forces regrouped in Yorkshire. On March 29, Palm Sunday, the two armies met near the village of Towton. What followed was the bloodiest day in English history. 50 to 75,000 men. Driving snow. The battle lasted 10 hours. Men fought until they literally couldn't lift their arms. The Lancastrians broke and ran. Edward's men pursued them for miles, cutting them down. Rivers ran red. Mass graves. Modern historians estimate 28,000 dead. That's approximately 1% of England's entire population killed in a single afternoon. To put that in perspective, that would be like 3 million Americans dying in one battle today. On June 28, 1461, Edward was formally crowned at Westminster Abbey. He was king. But his problems were just beginning. Edward inherited a financial nightmare. England's gold coins were vanishing. For over a century, England's premier gold coin had been the noble, worth 6 shillings and 8 pence. It was a beautiful coin, recognized across Europe, trusted by merchants from London to Venice. But there was a problem. Since the 1430s, the price of gold had been rising on the continent. By the 1460s, you could take an English noble to France or Flanders, exchange it for silver, and make a profit. Or better yet, just melt it down and sell the gold. It was called arbitrage, and it was bleeding England dry. Merchants were hoarding nobles and shipping them overseas. English gold coins were being melted by the thousands in French and Burgundian mints. The mint records tell the story. In 1458–59, the London Mint struck just £19 worth of gold coins. £19. For an entire year. For an entire nation. The first few years of Edward's reign weren't much better, only £293 of gold coined from 1461 to 1464. Edward's advisors debated solutions. Reduce the gold content? That would destroy confidence in the English currency. Ban export? Impossible to enforce with thousands of miles of coastline. So in 1464, Edward tried something clever. He changed the rules. By royal indenture, he increased the value of the existing noble from 6 shillings 8 pence to 8 shillings 4 pence. Just like that, every noble in England was suddenly worth 25% more. But this created chaos. Merchants didn't know what their coins were worth from one day to the next. Foreign traders were confused. The economy was destabilizing. So Edward introduced something entirely new. A coin worth 10 shillings, half a pound, made of heavier gold at 120 grains. The Rose Noble. The Ryal. The idea was simple, make English gold coins worth so much that it wouldn't be profitable to export them. The Royal Mint in London began striking them with this new design. The king in a ship, now with York's rose emblazoned on the hull. The ornate cross with the sunburst rose. This wasn't just currency. This was propaganda. And at the same time, Edward introduced a new 6 shilling 8 pence coin, the Angel, to replace the noble at its old value. The Angel would become one of England's most successful coins. But the Rose Noble? That's a different story. The Rose Noble was magnificent. It was prestigious. Foreign rulers loved it. But there was a problem, ordinary people found it too valuable to use. Remember, 10 shillings is a huge amount of money. A skilled craftsman earns about 6 pence a day. This single coin represented 3 months' wages for a working man. You couldn't use it to buy bread or clothes or horseshoes. It was too big. Production was limited. Edward's heavy coinage period of 1461 to 64 had seen very little gold minted. The light coinage period starting in 1464 saw more production, but the rose nobles remained relatively rare. Ironically, while the rose noble failed domestically, it succeeded internationally. Continental merchants loved it. It became one of the most respected gold coins in European trade. Flemish and Dutch mints began striking imitations, unofficial copies that circulated throughout Northern Europe for over a century. These Flemish nobles are fascinating artifacts in their own right. Some were struck as late as the 1590s, over 120 years after Edward's death, because the design and weight were so trusted by merchants. But by 1469, Edward had bigger problems than monetary policy. His former ally, Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, known as the Kingmaker, had turned against him. In 1470, Warwick allied with Edward's Lancastrian enemies and actually overthrew him. Edward fled to Burgundy. Henry VI was pulled out of the Tower of London and restored to the throne. The wars weren't over. But Edward came back in 1471. He defeated and killed Warwick at the Battle of Barnet. He destroyed the Lancastrian army at Tewkesbury and had Prince Edward of Westminster, Henry's son and heir, executed after the battle. Then Henry VI conveniently died in the Tower. Edward's throne was secure. And one of the first things Edward did? He stopped minting rose nobles. The experiment was over. By 1470, production had already slowed to a trickle. The coin had lasted barely 6 years. First, so what makes this coin special today? Why do collectors prize it? Rarity. The rose noble was only struck for about 6 years, 1464 to 1470. Production was limited even during that period. Most were exported and many were melted centuries ago. Survivors are genuinely scarce. Second, it's the most impressive coin in the Edward IV series. It's heavy. It's large. The design is magnificent. If you're collecting Yorkist gold, this is the crown jewel. There are multiple varieties based on mint marks, that little symbol that indicates when and sometimes where the coin was struck. The crown mint mark is the most common. Others include the rose, sun, and crown, and long cross fichy. Each has different rarity levels. Condition matters enormously. These coins circulated, often in international trade, and many show significant wear. A coin in fine condition, clearly used but with most details visible, might run $3,000 to $5,000. Very fine to extremely fine examples, well-preserved coins with sharp details, can fetch $7,000 to $12,000 or more. And uncirculated examples? They are extraordinarily rare and can command $15,000 to $25,000 at auction. This particular example appears to be in very fine to good very fine condition. The details are strong. The legends are complete and readable. There's a bit of an edge irregularity and some minor surface marks, possibly from being excavated at some point, but overall it's an excellent example of the type. With any medieval gold coin at this price level, authentication is crucial. These coins have been faked since they were first struck. Professional grading by services like NGC or PCGS is highly recommended. They'll verify authenticity, assess condition, and encapsulate the coin in a protective holder. But beyond monetary value, think about history. This coin was struck in the middle of England's bloodiest civil war. Edward IV personally fought in multiple battles. This coin might have been held by soldiers, merchants, nobles, people whose names are lost to history but whose stories are embedded in this gold. The rose noble represents a specific moment in English history. The 1460s. A young warrior king trying to stabilize a fractured nation. Economic crisis. Political intrigue. Military conflict. Edward would rule for another 13 years after abandoning the rose noble. His second reign was more stable. The economy has recovered. England prospered. But Edward died suddenly in 1483, aged just 40. Some say excess. Some say disease. The truth is lost. His death triggered a catastrophe. His brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, seized power, declared Edward's sons illegitimate, and had them, the famous princes in the Tower, imprisoned. They disappeared. Probably murdered. Richard III ruled for 2 years before Henry Tudor killed him at Bosworth Field in 1485. Henry VII united the houses of York and Lancaster by marrying Edward's daughter, Elizabeth of York. Their emblem, the Tudor rose, combined the white rose of York and the red rose of Lancaster. The Wars of the Roses is finally over. But this coin remembers. It remembers when York stood alone. When a 19-year-old warrior became king over mountains of corpses. When England's future is hanging in the balance. That rose on the ship's hull isn't just decoration. It's defiance. It's pride. It's a young king saying, I fought for this throne. I killed for it. I earned it. And my symbol, the white rose of York, will sail these seas forever. The rose noble failed as an everyday currency. But as a statement? As a work of art? As a piece of history you can hold in your hand? It's magnificent. The Edward IV Gold Rose Noble. Face value, 10 shillings. Weight, 120 grains of 23-karat gold. Rarity, scarce. Value today, $3,000 to $25,000 depending on condition. Historical significance, priceless. This coin was forged in war, crafted during a crisis, and abandoned before its time. But it survived. Through 5 centuries of English history. Through wars, fires, invasions, depressions. Through the fall of the Plantagenets, the rise of the Tudors, the birth of the Empire. This is the story of the Rose Noble, Edward IV Golden Gamble. If you enjoyed this journey into medieval English numismatics, please like and subscribe. Drop a comment about which historical coin you'd like me to cover next. And if you're lucky enough to own one of these, cherish it. You're holding 550 years of history in the palm of your hand.